Alright, hello. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel focused on looking at various theories of everything. And today is video number 231 that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. And this was a theory first put out by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He wrote books on physics and astrophysics and chemistry and astronomy and metaphysics and economics and other subjects. He also wrote a lot of articles, gave a lot of talks. Never really got any traction. Nobody's really ever heard of him. There's a handful of, more than a handful, but less than 100 followers of his who have attempted to put his work on the map. He died back in 1990. One of his followers, who's done the most work, is Dr. Bruce Perret, who also passed away back in 2020. But not before he wrote a lot of different material on the reciprocal system, and he not only kind of corrected some of the sticking points in the reciprocal system, but he also moved the work out into new fields, in particular geochronology, geology in general, and cryptohistory. Perret tends to be quite a bit more speculative than Larson, who was quite conservative in his approach, at least if you ask me. But we are reading one of Perret's articles that's called Geochronology, that he wrote under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix III. And this is part one of his anthropology series. So he's got 4 different articles here on his anthropology series, and this is the first one. And we were talking about planetary mechanics, and we were discussing the magnetic ionization level. So depending upon your planet, you have different planets have different ionization levels, is what Larson calls it. And the ionization level determines the stability of the various elements. In Larson's system, there are 117 different elements, but only 92 of them, up to uranium, are stable or can be stable on Earth, because the Earth has a magnetic ionization level of 1. If it had a magnetic ionization level of 0, all 117 elements would be stable. And the higher the ionization level, the fewer elements are stable. So we'll be getting into that. Let me just give you a quick rundown of the reciprocal system before we start. In Larson's world, the universe is made out of motion. Not matter, not energy, but motion. Matter and energy are just certain kinds of motion, and Larson defined motion as the relationship between space and time. And so space and time are set up as basically generalized reciprocals of one another. And just like a fraction, 3 is the reciprocal of 1/3. 3 over 1 equals the reciprocal of 1 over 3. And in Larson's system, all motions, all forms of motion are a fraction with either time or space as the numerator and either space or time as the denominator. Now, space and time have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they both come in 3 or more dimensions. So there's coordinate space, XYZ coordinates, that we're familiar with, but then there is also coordinate time. three or more dimensions of time. And then space and time also have their scalar aspects. That is a motion that has a magnitude but does not have a direction. And it's a different kind of motion that you would envision by taking a balloon, putting a bunch of dots on the balloon. You blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. That is really the progression of space. And if then you sucked in the balloon, all the dots would be moving toward each other. That is really a inward progression of space, which also would be known as gravity. So there is a clock time and clock space. So the clock is always getting later and later and later in time. And in the same way in space, clock space is that everything is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. So that is the progression of space. If it moves inward, then space is always getting closer and closer and closer together. That's more like gravity. So the progression is really like an anti-gravity motion. Then time and space also come only in discrete units. There's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. And less than 1 unit of space, then you don't have space. You only have time. You either have one or the other. And so within a unit of space, you have what is Larson calls the time region. And within a unit of time, you have what Larson calls the space region. And those are both within sectors of the universe that Larson refers to as the cosmic sector and the material sector. Those are determined by using the discrete unit postulate. If you just have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, okay, space divided by time, that's speed, just like the bike is going 20 miles an hour, 20 miles of space in 1 hour of time. 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. Okay, so the speed of light is 1 over 1. And that sets up a boundary between these two sectors. The material sector is everything moving slower than the speed of light. And then the cosmic sector is everything moving faster than the speed of light. This is the sector of the universe that Einstein knew nothing about, or nor do most of the mainstream scientists. When Einstein said that nothing moves faster than the speed of light, he's really referring to just the material sector. Now, within the material sector, you have also the time region, which is in less than 1 unit of space. And then within the cosmic sector, you have the space region, everything that is within 1 unit of time. And so that's kind of how the whole thing is set up. You can extrapolate from one region to the other. So we know a great deal about the material sector. We know very little about the cosmic sector. But we can extrapolate from the material sector to the cosmic sector merely by switching the roles of time and space. So in the material sector, we have 3 dimensions of space, coordinate space, and a clock moving forward, clock time. But in the cosmic sector, we have 3 dimensions of time progressing through space, clock space, coordinate time and clock space in the cosmic sector. Okay, now let's get to this article. Now he just put up a graph here that shows the stability element, the stability for the elements depending upon the magnetic ionization level. So we'll start here. The chart indicates the zone of stability for elements at a given magnetic ionization level using Larson's natural units of magnetism. All the elements below the line will be stable in the environment. All the elements above will be radioactive. For an example, at a magnetic ionization level of 2, the stable elements are from hydrogen, element 1, to platinum, element 78. The radioactive elements would start with gold, atomic number 79, on up to element number 117, which is the maximum element in the reciprocal system. One of the major consequences of the planetary cores having the similar inverse density gradient of the white dwarfs is that the heaviest elements are on the outside and the lightest ones are deep underground until meteoric aggregation covers them up with dirt and they have to be dug out. Consider if a bunch of extraterrestrial engineers were out to exploit some heavy metal along with all the gems produced by extremely high surface temperatures of the early core, the inner planets of a newly forming solar system would literally be a gold mine. And so that is, kind of what the Anunnaki were here for. Now, I didn't clarify this, but today, this is the 7th episode that we've done on this article. So if you want to go back to the beginning of the article, you want to go back about 6 episodes and start from there. We're taking over right in the middle here. Now, we just we're getting to a new section here that's called Using Atlantis to Correct Geochronology. People have suspected for a long time that our world has been visited by extraterrestrial species, as there is a considerable amount of evidence laying about that would indicate visitation by a spacefaring race. The difficulty has been that researchers could not correlate the evidence with a mythological chronology or geography because of the bad assumptions concerning geologic dating and the belief that the Earth always looked just as it does now. When we corrected the interpretation of years for the Mayan calendar, which we did earlier, it matched the Hebrew calendar. The same thing happens when the billions and billions of years of geochronology becomes thousands and thousands of years, which he was explaining earlier through the error that comes into radioactive dating. And he was showing how radioactive dating, uranium being a 4.5 billion year half-life, that really is something much, 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 much smaller, like in the thousands of years instead of in the billions of years. There are a number of sources that can be used to build a correlation between the accepted geochronology and the corrected calendar. Since Edgar Cayce's references to Atlantis are fairly well known, I will start with them. Cayce identified 3 destructions of Atlantis. The first, in 50,000 BCE, a technological attempt to eliminate the giant beasts ravaging the land failed and resulted in a major upheaval of the land, splitting the continent into 3 large islands of Poseid, Arion, and Og. And then the second breakup of Atlantis, 28,000 BC. Earthquakes and flooding that resulted in Poseida's climate changing for the worse, to the point where the island was evacuated before it froze over. And then the third breakup is 10,000 BC, the final breakup of the islands of Atlantis. When a person receives information from a non-sensory source, like channels or dreams, the expression of the information is limited to the symbols and motifs that the person is familiar with. This has been scientifically demonstrated in situations where primitive tribes describe aircraft as giant birds. The same situation works with chronology. When Casey selected these dates, they were based on the information he accepted as truth, the geochronology of the period. In the case of the final breakup of Atlantis, the date was commonly accepted as 9600 BCE, which comes from Plato's recounting of Solon's story of the continent, 9,000 years before his time. Solon's date was circa 600 BCE, so 600 plus 9,000 is 9600, the accepted time of the fall of Atlantis that was known to Casey. Then along comes one Angelos Gallinopoulos, pointing out in his 1969 book Atlantis, The Truth Behind the Legend, that there was a slight error in the Egyptian translation of 9,000 years. It was actually 900 years, making the time frame of the destruction of Atlantis about 1500 BC. From the prior exploration of the calendar, we know that the end of the fourth Bacton in the Mayan calendar was 1548 BC, corresponding with the exodus from Egypt, the plagues, winds, shaking of land, and fire falling from the sky. The final destruction of Atlantis now corresponds with the Mayan and Hebrew records of the period and gives us a working point to make an educated guess at the first and second destructions. We already know that the correlation is off by approximately 10 to 1. We can estimate that the first destruction of Atlantis was no more than 5000 BCE, and the second no more than 2800 BCE, based on Casey's information. We also know that the year counts are off due to the number of days per year changing. We can make a quick estimate of what year 5000 BCE is actually referring to on the corrected calendar. The early calendar was 260 days per year, and the final switch to 365 took place in 749 BC. So if we make the pre-749 BC years and adjust, we get 500 minus 749, the quantity times 260 over 365 equals 3,026 years past 749 BC, making the 5,000 BCE date on our corrected calendar to be around 3775 BCE. And right there at 3761 BCE, we have the start of the Mayan and Hebrew calendars, defining the creation of man. If we apply the same logic to the 2800 date, then we end up at 2209 BCE, corrected calendar, with the biblical flood sitting at 2105 BC, which he says is a very close match, although that's 104 years. But anyway, so we can now draw the following correlations as a starting point. So he's saying that the first break of Atlantis was 3761 BC, and that corresponds with the biblical creation of Adam and Eve, Mayan creation of human world, and the first destruction of Atlantis. 2105 BC, the biblical deluge, the Mayan deluge, only about 5.5 modern years from the end of the third Bacton. Second destruction of Atlantis. And then in 1548 BC, we've got the Hebrew exodus from Egypt and the third destruction of Atlantis. I have issues with all of this dating, but it's just I think you can just fudge the numbers way too much to be able to make this valid. And he's hinging it all on this one quote from this guy that says that the 9,000 years before Solon is actually 900, and then he uses that factor of 10 for everything. And he did this earlier in the article as well, when he was coming up with the correlation between the Mayan calendar and the Hebrew calendar. I just feel like that, I'm kind of a numbers guy, and it's just too much wishful thinking in my opinion, but we'll just keep going. The inference is obvious. The inference is obvious. Mankind was created by God or gods around 3761 BC, which we are incorrectly dating as 50,000 BCE. I might add myself that Zecharia Sitchin has that date as actually 443,000 years BC. So, where Perret is trying to shrink the time, he's trying to shrink the time limit, which I find plausible. Sitchin is trying to expand the time limit, and don't really know, it's accordion history or something, but I think that both of them are trying to fudge the dates a little bit, although and they also contend that with Sitchin that Asar, which is the Sumerian year, is actually 3,600 years. In Perret's system, that SAR is actually just 10 years. So there's a huge discrepancy going on, and I'm guessing that it's somewhere in between the two. But, Perret is wanting to shrink the time scale, and Sitchin is trying to lengthen the time scale. For me, I'm a little bit more inclined to believe the shorter time scale, but I don't know if it's as short as what Perret's saying, where that the creation of human beings was just less than 6,000 years ago, same as what the Bible says. So anyway, I know Perret isn't like a Bible thumper or anything like that, but he's wanting to use that same chronology. Anyway, we will grapple with those issues tomorrow, and we will get back to starting right here tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope you have a great day.